What if I told you that a royal guard would watch her king die 50 times and by the end, she'd be the one deciding whether he deserved to live? This is the story of Captain Kesi and the cause that trapped her in the most twisted day of her life. But here's what will shock you. The real enemy wasn't the assassin. It wasn't even time itself. The enemy was the truth she'd been running from for years. Captain Kesi had protected King Bakari for 7 years. 7 years without a single threat reaching him. She was the kingdom's most skilled guard, trusted above all others. But on this morning, the festival of unity, everything would change. The king stood on the palace balcony, addressing thousands of cheering citizens below. Kesi scanned the crowd, alert as always. Nothing seemed wrong. The sun was shining, the people were celebrating, and security was tight. Then, at exactly 11:47 a.m., an arrow flew through the air. It found its mark directly in the king's heart. Kesi lunged forward, but it was too late. King Bakari collapsed into her arms, blood streaming from his chest. His eyes met hers one final time before the life faded from them. She had failed. The one person she'd sworn to protect above all else was dead. As darkness crept over her vision and the world faded away, Kesi expected death. Instead, she woke up. Sunlight streamed through her quarters, the same angle, the same warmth, the same servant knocking at her door with the morning report. "Captain, the festival preparations are complete." Wait, this had happened before, exactly before. Kesi rushed through her morning routine, convinced it was just déjà vu. But as the day progressed, every conversation, every gesture, every cloud in the sky happened precisely as she remembered. At 11:47 a.m., she watched in horror as the same arrow flew through the air. She screamed a warning, but the king dismissed her as paranoid. The arrow struck. King Bakari died in her arms again. But this time, as darkness closed in, Kesi realized something impossible was happening to her. Dawn broke for the 3rd time on the same day. This wasn't déjà vu. This wasn't a dream. This was a curse. Kesi traced the arrow's path backwards, climbing to rooftops, searching shadows. There, on the bell tower across the square, a hooded figure with a bow. She sprinted through the crowds, sword drawn, determination burning in her chest. This time would be different. This time, she'd save her king. She burst through the tower door just as the archer took aim. Her blade found his throat before he could lose the arrow. Victory! Finally! She turned toward the balcony, expecting to see King Bakari safe. Instead, she watched a small dart fly from a completely different direction, a shop window across the square. The dart struck the king's neck. Poison. He collapsed instantly. 11:47 a.m. Always 11:47 a.m. The 3rd loop revealed the horrifying truth that this wasn't a single assassin. This was a coordinated attack with multiple backup plans. Kesi positioned guards at every window, every rooftop, every possible vantage point. She was thorough, methodical, brilliant. The archers had no shot. The dart thrower was blocked. At 11:30 a.m., she allowed herself a moment of hope. 17 minutes until the cursed time and every threat was neutralized. Then, King Bakari clutched his throat and collapsed. The wine he had drunk at breakfast, someone had poisoned it hours earlier. 11:47 a.m. arrived like clockwork, and with it, the king's death. Loop 4. She dumped the wine, replaced it with water. Loop poison could reach the king. This time she was certain. She'd eliminated every possible threat. As the king addressed the crowd, Kesi felt a moment of triumph. 11:46 a.m. passed. Then 11:47 a.m. approached. A loyal servant stepped forward to offer the king a ceremonial cup. As King Bakari reached for it, the servant's hidden blade flashed upwards, piercing his heart. Even the king's most trusted attendants were part of this conspiracy. 11:47 a.m. The curse continued. By the 5th loop, the horrifying scope of the conspiracy became clear. This wasn't random. This wasn't opportunistic. Someone wanted King Bakari dead so badly that they'd prepared for every contingency. They had archers, poisoners, assassins disguised as servants, and backup plans for their backup plans.
But who? And why were they so determined? More importantly, why was Kesi trapped in this endless cycle of failure? As the fifth loop ended with the king's inevitable death, one question haunted her. Was she meant to save him, or was she meant to learn something else entirely? By loop 6, Kesi had shifted strategies. Instead of just preventing the murder, she would solve it. 6 people had access, opportunity, and potential motives. 6 people who could orchestrate such an elaborate conspiracy. First, Lord Tamir, the king's chief advisor. He controlled palace security, knew every guard's position, and had access to the king's food and drink. If anyone could coordinate multiple assassination attempts, it was him. Second, Princess Dalila, the king's own daughter. She stood to inherit the throne and had been acting strangely for weeks. Could a daughter really murder her father for power? Third, Captain Omari, Kesi's own superior. He could order guards away from crucial positions and had trained most of the palace security. A betrayal from within their own ranks would explain everything. Fourth, Queen Nura, the king's beloved wife. She knew his routines better than anyone, could poison his food without suspicion, and had access to his private chambers. But what could drive a loving wife to murder? Fifth, Master Chen, the royal chef who prepared all of the king's meals. He had access to every dish, every cup, every morsel that passed the king's lips, and he had been acting nervous lately, avoiding eye contact with the royal family. Sixth, Commander Vasquez, the festival coordinator who had planned every detail of the day's events. He knew the exact timing of the king's speech, the positioning of every guard, and had hired dozens of temporary workers for the celebration. Any one of them could be an assassin. Kesi had infinite loops to investigate them all. 8 days into her cursed existence, Kesi made her first shocking discovery. While following Lord Tamir through the palace corridors, she discovered his secret office. Hidden ledgers revealed that he had been embezzling massive amounts from the royal treasury. Thousands of gold pieces diverted from taxes meant for the kingdom's defense. Money that could have fed hundreds of families, instead lining Tamir's personal coffers. When the king discovered this theft, and he would, eventually, Tamir would face execution. Murder was his only escape. But as she followed him through the next several loops, something felt wrong. His shock at the king's death seemed genuine. His grief appeared real. She discovered where his stolen money was going to, a gambling house in the lower city where Tamir had accumulated debts that would destroy not just him, but his entire family. He wasn't stealing for luxury. He was stealing out of desperation. When she confronted him in a later loop, his breakdown was immediate and complete. "I never meant for it to go this far, Kesi," he sobbed, falling to his knees. "They threatened to kill my grandchildren. What kind of man would I be if I let innocents die for my mistakes?" Either he was the kingdom's greatest actor, or he was just a desperate old man who'd made terrible choices. The royal chef's strange behavior demanded investigation. Master Chen had been avoiding the royal family for weeks, claiming illness whenever summoned to discuss meals personally. His kitchen staff whispered about mysterious late-night meetings and ingredients that didn't match any recipes. Following him through several loops, Kesi discovered he had been meeting with foreign merchants in dark alleys, purchasing rare spices and exotic herbs. Some of these ingredients were known to be deadly in the right combinations. The evidence seemed damning. Chen had opportunity, access, and was clearly obtaining poison. But when Kesi broke into his private quarters, she found the truth. Love letters, dozens of them, written in Chen's careful handwriting, addressed to Lord Tamir's widowed daughter. The mysterious ingredients weren't poisons, they were rare delicacies he had been preparing as courting gifts. The late-night meetings were romantic rendezvous. The nervousness around the royal family came from fear that his relationship would be discovered and deemed inappropriate for his servant. Chen wasn't planning murder, he was planning marriage.
Another suspect eliminated, but the mystery deepened. The festival coordinator controlled every aspect of the day's events. Commander Vasquez had hired over 200 temporary workers, musicians, decorators, food vendors, and crowd controllers. Any one of them could be an assassin hiding in plain sight. Through multiple loops, Kesi investigated his hiring practices. she discovered he'd accepted workers with minimal background checks, paid some of them in untraceable gold, and had access to detailed palace blueprints that should have been classified. Most suspicious of all, she found a locked chest in his quarters containing what appeared to be architectural plans of the palace, guard rotation schedules, and a detailed timeline of the king's appearance on the balcony. This was it. Commander Vasquez was clearly the mastermind. But when she confronted him, the truth unraveled everything she thought she knew. "Those plans aren't for an assassination," Vasquez explained, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "They are for protection. 3 weeks ago, I received intelligence that foreign agents were planning to infiltrate the festival. I have been quietly investigating every worker, every vendor, every person with access to the celebration." He showed her a hidden collection of correspondence with the kingdom's intelligence network. The suspicious gold payments were actually payments to undercover agents he'd embedded among the festival workers. The architectural plans were security assessments to identify vulnerabilities. Commander Vasquez wasn't organizing the king's murder, he was trying to prevent it. After several more attempts to save the king, Kesi discovered Princess Dalila's dangerous game. Following the princess through the palace gardens, she discovered secret meetings with foreign diplomats, hushed conversations about troop movements, border defenses, and strategic weaknesses. The meetings grew more frequent as the festival approached. Maps were exchanged, documents changed hands, gold was transferred in unmarked pouches. Was the princess selling her father's kingdom to enemy nations? Was she planning to hand over the throne to foreign powers in exchange for her father's death? The evidence seemed damning. Maps of the kingdom's defenses, correspondence with rival kingdoms, and payment in foreign gold. But Kesi's investigation revealed a more complex truth. Princess Dalila wasn't selling information, she was buying it. The foreign diplomats were double agents, and the princess was secretly funding an intelligence network that fed her information about external threats to the kingdom. The maps she received showed enemy troop positions. The correspondence revealed invasion plans. The gold she paid was purchasing early warnings about attacks on the kingdom's borders. But days later, Kesi witnessed something that changed everything. After the king's death, Princess Dalila collapsed in genuine, heart-wrenching sobs. She cradled her father's body and whispered, "I should have told you about the threats. I should have warned you." She wasn't betraying her father, she was trying to protect him from enemies he didn't even know existed. More days of investigation exposed Captain Omari's dark secret. Hidden payments, gold coins from unknown sources, far more than a captain's salary could explain. Bank records showed regular deposits that coincided with key security decisions. Someone had been paying Captain Omari to compromise palace defenses. The money trail was clear, the evidence undeniable. But which security lapses were intentional? Which guard rotations were designed to create opportunities for assassination? Following him through multiple loops, Kesi discovered the payment came from desperate families throughout the kingdom. Families whose sons had been conscripted for dangerous border patrol duties. Families who paid Captain Omari to reassign their children to safer positions within the palace guard. She also discovered why he needed the money so desperately. Hidden in his quarters were physicians' reports about his daughter's rare disease, a condition that required expensive treatments from foreign doctors. Kesi confronted him the next time she relived that day, and his confession shattered her world. "I've been taking money, yes," Captain Omari admitted, tears streaming down his weathered face. "But not to help assassins. My daughter, she's sick, Kesi. The treatment cost more than I earn in 5 years. The payments were from desperate families wanting their sons assigned to safer duties away from the dangerous border patrols." His voice broke completely. "I know it's wrong. I know it's corruption. But when you watch your child suffer and you have the power to save her, what kind of father would I be if I didn't try everything?" He was corrupt, but not murderous. Desperate, but not traitorous. Another suspect eliminated. Then came the most painful discovery of all. Queen Noura's secret visits to the market weren't for fresh flowers or exotic spices.
She'd been purchasing rare herbs from mysterious merchants who appeared only during the festival. Herbs that in the wrong combinations could be deadly. Poisons. Kesi followed Queen Nura through her morning routine, watching how she carefully selected plants and powders, the same plants that could create the poison found in the king's wine during earlier loops. The evidence was overwhelming. The loving wife was planning to murder her husband. Kesi shadowed Queen Nura for days, documenting every purchase, every secretive meeting, every suspicious action. She watched the queen prepare tinctures and powders in her private chambers, working with the precision of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. But the next time she relived that cursed day, Kesi discovered the truth behind the queen's purchases. Hidden in Queen Nura's private chambers was a collection of letters from palace physicians. King Bakari was dying, slowly, painfully, from a wasting disease that would take months to kill him. The disease was spreading through his body like fire, causing agony with every breath. The poisons were mercy, pain relievers to ease his suffering, sleeping draughts to give him peaceful rest. The queen was learning from herbalists how to prepare medicines that would make her husband's final days bearable. The queen wasn't planning murder. She was planning compassion for a husband too proud to admit his weakness. After weeks of investigation, though each day was the same day over and over, Kesi had eliminated every suspect. Lord Tamir was a thief, but not a killer. Master Chen was a romantic, but not an assassin. Commander Vasquez was a protector, but not a conspirator. Princess Dalila was a spy, but a loyal one. Captain Omari was corrupt, but protective. Queen Nura was secretive, but loving. So who was orchestrating King Bakari's murder with such deadly precision? The paranoia began to consume her. If none of the obvious suspects were guilty, then who could she trust? Was there a seventh conspirator she hadn't identified? A foreign agent so skilled that evaded all her investigations? Or worse still, was the conspiracy so vast that it included people she hadn't even considered? Palace servants she had known for years? Guards she had trained personally? Citizens in the crowd who seemed innocently celebrating.
The next phase of loops brought devastating false breakthroughs. In one loop, Kesi became convinced the conspiracy was being orchestrated by the kingdom's religious leaders, who wanted to install a more pious ruler. She spent an entire day investigating the high priest, only to discover he was planning a surprise blessing for the king's continued health. In another loop, she suspected a conspiracy among the palace guards themselves, a mutiny from within. She interrogated dozens of loyal soldiers, destroying friendships and trust, only to find they were planning a surprise celebration of her own 7 years of faithful service. Each false solution consumed precious time and mental energy. Each incorrect theory led her down rabbit holes that revealed nothing but her own growing desperation. The worst part was the growing certainty that she was missing something obvious, something so clear that she should have seen it immediately, but her own assumptions were blinding her to the truth. As yet another day ended with the king's death at 11:47 a.m., a terrible possibility began to form in Kesi's mind. What if the conspiracy she'd been investigating was something she hadn't considered? What if the person she needed to investigate was herself? The thought was so disturbing, she tried to dismiss it immediately. But as the loops continued, small details began to gnaw at her consciousness. Why was she the only person experiencing the time loop? Why did she have perfect recall of events that for everyone else had never happened? Why did her own memories of the original day feel strangely incomplete? Most terrifying of all, in all her investigations, she never found the true mastermind behind the conspiracy. Every lead went cold. Every suspect had alibis. Every arrow, every poison, every blade seemed to appear from nowhere,
wielded by assassins who vanished like smoke. It was as if the universe itself wanted King Bakari dead at that exact moment, or as if someone with intimate knowledge of palace security, royal routines, and the king's exact location at 11:47 a.m. had planned everything perfectly. Someone, like a royal guard who'd spent 7 years studying every detail of the king's protection. After countless failed attempts, Kesi finally achieved the impossible. She saved King Bakari's life. Every assassin neutralized, every poison intercepted, every blade turned away. At 11:48 a.m., 1 minute past the cursed time, the king still lived. For the first time in weeks, Kesi allowed herself to feel triumph. She had broken the pattern. She had fulfilled her oath. But victory tasted like ash when she discovered what came next. That evening, as celebration echoed through the palace halls, Kesi overheard a conversation that froze her blood. King Bakari stood in his private chamber speaking with his generals about a village on the kingdom's border. The entire settlement harbors rebels. Every man, woman, and child will make an example of them tomorrow. Burn everything, leave no survivors. Kesi's heart pounded. Your Majesty, surely not the children. Especially the children, King Bakari interrupted, his eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. When future generations hear what happens to those who defy me, they remember the price of rebellion. 300 innocent people, farmers, merchants, children playing in the streets, all condemned to die because their village had given food to hungry refugees. The king she'd sworn to protect with her life was a monster. The next morning, Kesi woke to the same dawn, the same cursed day, but now everything had changed. She could save the king, but saving him meant condemning 300 innocents to death. She could let him die, but that would make her complicit in murder. What was the right choice? What was the honorable choice? Standing on the palace balcony as the clock approached 11:47 a.m., Kesi watched the familiar arrow fly toward King Bakari's heart. This time, she didn't move. The arrow struck. The king died. And those 300 villagers would live another day. But the loop continued. Dawn broke again on the same cursed morning. With each repeated day, Kesi used her infinite time to investigate the man she'd protected for 7 years. What she discovered shattered every belief she'd held about honor, duty, and the crown she served. The king wasn't just planning one massacre. He'd been secretly selling his own people into slavery to fund his endless wars. Entire families disappeared in the night, shipped to foreign lands in chains, their freedom traded for gold to buy weapons. The king had murdered his own brother to claim the throne, poisoning him slowly over months while pretending to mourn his mysterious illness. He'd been systematically starving the outer provinces, hoarding grain in royal warehouses while children died of hunger, all to keep the capital city's loyalty through abundant food. Every policy, every decision, every royal decree had been calculated to increase his power while crushing anyone who might threaten it. The man Kesi had sworn to protect with her life was responsible for more death and suffering than any assassin could ever cause. As the days repeated endlessly, Kesi found herself trapped in an impossible moral maze. Save the king and become an accomplice to genocide. Kill the king and become a murderer. Let others kill him and become a coward who abandoned his post. But there was a fourth option she hadn't considered, one that feared her more than all the others. What if this wasn't about the king at all? Days turned into weeks of repetition, and Kesi began to notice something strange. The assassination attempts weren't random. They were too perfectly timed, too precisely coordinated, too specifically designed to happen at exactly 11:47 a.m. Most disturbing of all, in all her investigations, she never found the true mastermind behind the conspiracy. Every lead went cold. Every suspect had alibis. Every arrow, every poison, every blade seemed to appear from nowhere, wielded by assassins who vanished like smoke. It was as if the universe itself wanted King Bakari dead at that exact moment, or as if someone with intimate knowledge of palace security, royal routines, and the king's exact location at 11:47 a.m. had planned everything perfectly. Someone like a royal guard who'd spent 7 years studying every detail of the king's protection. What if the conspiracy she'd been investigating was her own suppressed plan?
Hidden in her own quarters, beneath loose floorboards she didn't remember loosening, she found a journal written in her own handwriting. Pages and pages of meticulous planning, detailed schedules, and assassination plots. All in her hand, all targeting King Bakari. The final entry was dated 3 months ago. The Festival of Unity will provide perfect cover, multiple backup plans prepared, target elimination at 11:47 a.m. during the speech. If I cannot go through with it, may the gods forgive me for my cowardice. The horrible truth crashed over her like a frozen wave. She was the mastermind. She was the conspiracy. Piece by piece, her buried memories returned. 3 months ago, she'd been approached by a secret organization, not rebels or foreign agents, but the kingdom's own intelligence network. They discovered King Bakari's crimes and planned atrocities. The evidence was overwhelming. The king's brother hadn't died of illness. He'd been slowly poisoned. The missing villagers hadn't fled. They'd been sold into slavery. The failed harvests weren't due to weather. They were artificially created by destroying seed stores. King Bakari was a cancer destroying the kingdom from within. And traditional justice couldn't touch him. He was too powerful, too protected, too cunning. Someone had to stop him. Someone close enough to get past his defenses. Someone like his most trusted guard. Kesi had agreed to the mission. She'd planned everything perfectly. Multiple assassination methods, backup plans, precise timing. She'd recruited other agents without them knowing they were part of a larger conspiracy, each believing they were working alone. But when the moment came, she couldn't do it. 7 years of loyalty, 7 years of believing in the oath she'd sworn, 7 years of thinking she was protecting a good man. At 11:47 a.m., as her first arrow flew towards the king's heart, she'd thrown herself forward to block it. Her magical oath of protection, combined with her conflicted emotions and the weight of suppressed guilt, had created something unprecedented. A temporal curse that trapped her in the moment of her greatest failure. But the most devastating revelation was yet to come. As Kesi stood in the palace courtyard, reeling from recovered memories, a familiar voice spoke behind her. "I wondered when you'd finally remember." She turned to see King Bakari himself, very much alive, very much aware, and very much amused. You know about the loops?" King Bakari smiled, the same cold smile she'd seen when he ordered the massacre of innocents. "My dear Kesi, I've been aware of every single repetition. Every loop, I've watched you discover my crimes. Every loop, I've seen you wrestle with the choice of whether I deserve to live." The world tilted beneath her feet. "That's impossible." "Is it? You're not the only one with magical protection, Captain. The royal bloodline carries its own ancient safeguards. When your temporal curse trapped this day, it trapped me as well. And where? Awake
and remembering everything. He stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with malicious intelligence. 50 times, Kesi. 50 times I've watched you learn the truth about me. 50 times I've seen you decide I am a monster. And 50 times you failed to do what you originally planned. This has all been a test, King Bakari continued, circling her like a predator. Not of your loyalty, I know that's broken. Not of your skill, I've seen that repeatedly. This is a test of your character. What are you talking about? The loop won't end until you make a choice and commit to it completely. No hesitation, no regrets, no second guessing. The magic binding us demands absolute certainty. King Bakari's voice grew soft, almost hypnotic. You have 3 options, my dear captain. Save the monster and preserve your honor. Kill the monster and damn your soul. Or let others kill the monster and live as a coward forever. He spread his arms wide, utterly confident. But here's what you haven't realized. I've been counting on your weakness. 50 loops and you've still not acted decisively. You're too moral, too conflicted, too good to make the hard choice. I'll die tomorrow anyway, from the wasting disease my loving wife has been trying to ease. Those 300 villagers will die the day after, and 1,000 more the week after that. But you'll be trapped here forever, paralyzed by your own conscience, unless you finally find the courage to choose. As 11:47 a.m. approached once again, Kesi stood frozen in the courtyard, King Bakari's words echoing in her mind. Save him, kill him, let him die. All paths seemed to lead to moral compromise. But as the familiar sounds of the festival reached her ears, children laughing, families celebrating, innocent people enjoying a day of peace, Kesi realized something profound. King Bakari had given her 3 choices, but he'd made a fatal assumption. He'd assumed she would think like him in terms of simple binaries, absolute power, and zero-sum games. He'd forgotten that she'd spent 50 loops learning not just about his crimes, but about justice itself. There was a 4th option, one that required not just courage, but wisdom. As the clock struck 11:46 a.m., Kesi made her choice. She ran towards the palace balcony drawing her sword, not to kill, but to protect. As the familiar arrow flew through the air, she knocked it aside with her blade. King Bakari lived, but as he turned to thank her, Kesi's voice rang out across the festival crowd. People of the kingdom, I arrest King Bakari in the name of justice. The crowd gasped as Kesi continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the square. This man has committed genocide. He has sold your children into slavery. He murdered his own brother for power. You dare? I choose justice, Kesi declared, her voice ringing with absolute conviction. Not murder, not cowardice, but justice. For the first time in 50 repetitions of that cursed day, something changed. The clock struck 11:47 a.m. and kept moving. 11:48 a.m., 11:49 a.m., 12 noon. The curse shattered like glass and time flowed forward once again. King Bakari would live to face trial for his crimes. The kingdom would learn the truth about their ruler. Chaos would follow, but it would be honest chaos, not the false peace built on hidden atrocities. As Kesi walked away from the palace, no longer a royal guard, but finally free from the weight of blind loyalty, she realized the truth about the curse. It had never been a punishment. It had been an opportunity. 50 chances to find not just the easy choice, but the right one. And in the end, the right choice wasn't about life or death. It was about justice. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, time moved forward. 11:49 a.m., 11:50 a.m., 11:51 a.m. Each passing minute felt like a miracle. The festival crowd shocked murmurs filled the air as palace guards surrounded their fallen king, not dead but disgraced, arrested by his own protector. King Bakari's eyes blazed with fury as shackles were placed on his wrists. "You have no idea what you've done," he snarled at Kesi. "Without me, this kingdom will tear itself apart." "Maybe," Kesi replied, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "But at least it will be honest chaos, not the false peace you built on mass graves." As the guards led him away, King Bakari called back over his shoulder, "You think you chose justice? You chose destruction. When the kingdom falls, remember, you could have prevented it." But Kesi felt no doubt. For the first time in 50 repetitions of that cursed day, her conscience was clear. The revelation of King Bakari's crime sent shockwaves through the kingdom that reached far beyond the festival square. Princess Delilah, her investigation into foreign threats, now revealed to be an attempt to protect her father from external enemies, faced the devastating truth that the greatest threat had been sitting on the throne all along. Queen Nura, whose secret purchases of pain-relieving herbs were meant to ease her husband's suffering, now had to confront the reality that the man she'd loved was responsible for countless deaths. Captain Omari, whose corruption to pay for his daughter's medical treatment had made him doubt his own honor, found himself thrust into the role of maintaining order as the kingdom's power structure collapsed.
Lord Tamir, the embezzling advisor who had stolen to fund his gambling debts, suddenly seemed like a petty criminal compared to the monster he'd served. Each of them faced a choice similar to the one Kesi had confronted. How do you rebuild when everything you believed was built on lies? Within days, the full scope of King Bakari's atrocities became public knowledge. Mass graves were discovered outside the capital, the remains of disappeared families who had been sold into slavery. The poison that killed the king's brother was found hidden in the royal chambers. Correspondence with slave traders was uncovered in the royal vaults. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and horrifying. But justice, Kesi learned, was more complicated than simply exposing the truth. Some nobles demanded King Bakari's immediate execution. Others insisted that executing a sitting king, even a criminal one, would set a dangerous precedent. Foreign kingdoms threatened to invade during the instability. Regional governors declared independence rather than serve a realm built on such foundations. The kingdom didn't just face political chaos, it faced potential civil war. As weeks passed and the kingdom struggled to find its footing, Kesi found herself both celebrated as a hero and reviled as a traitor. The families of King Bakari's victims praised her courage in exposing the truth. Statues were erected in her honor. Songs were written about the royal guard who chose justice over loyalty. But others blamed her for the chaos that followed. Merchants whose trade routes were disrupted by political instability cast her name. Soldiers who lost their positions when the royal army was disbanded called her a destroyer of order. Most painful of all were the voices of those who said she should have found another way, that surely there was a solution that didn't require tearing down everything at once. "You had infinite chances to find a better path," one critic wrote in a scathing letter. 50 loops, and the best you could do was create anarchy? But Kesi knew something her critics didn't. She had tried everything else. Every compromise, every middle ground, every attempt to work within the system had failed. Sometimes, the only way to heal a wound is to cut out all the infected tissue, even if it causes pain. Standing in the garden where she'd first discovered Princess Dalilah's secret meetings, Kesi reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. The time loop wasn't a punishment. It was the most extraordinary gift imaginable. How many people in history had been given unlimited chances to find the perfect solution to an impossible problem?
But the Kesi's true wisdom wasn't in the repetition itself. It was in teaching her that there was no perfect solution. Some problems don't have clean answers. Some choices require accepting that any action would have terrible consequences. The measure of a person isn't whether they can avoid difficult choices. It's whether they can make those choices and live with them completely. King Bakari had been wrong about one crucial thing. Kesi hadn't been paralyzed by her moral compass. She had been guided by it toward the one choice she could make with absolute certainty: the choice to value truth and justice over comfort and stability. 6 months after the Festival of Unity became the Day of Reckoning, the kingdom began to find its balance. A council of representatives from each province had been established to create new laws. King Bakari, after a fair and public trial, had been sentenced to life imprisonment, not execution, as many demanded, but permanent removal from power. The royal bloodline was declared forfeit, and plans were made for the kingdom's first elected leadership. It wasn't perfect. There were still disputes, still corruption, still injustices. But now, these problems could be addressed openly instead of hidden behind royal decrees and false patriotism. Princess Dalila, her skills in intelligence gathering redirected toward protecting the new government, became the head of internal security. Queen Nura established hospitals for the poor, using the royal treasury's recovered funds. Captain Omari trained a new generation of guards sworn to protect the people, rather than just the powerful. Lord Tamir was still a gambling addict and a thief, but at least now his crimes were proportional to his character. As for Kesi herself, she faced one final decision. The new provisional government offered to make her the head of their security forces. The people demanded she run for high office. Foreign kingdoms sent ambassadors requesting her services as a military advisor. Everyone wanted to claim the woman who had broken a tyrant's power. But Kesi had learned something valuable in those 50 loops. Sometimes, the most important choice is knowing when to walk away. On a crisp morning, exactly 1 year after the curse had been broken, she stood at the kingdom's border with nothing but a traveler's pack and her sword. Behind her lay the capital, still struggling with the chaos she had unleashed, but finally free to struggle honestly. Ahead lay unknown roads, new challenges, and the opportunity to help others without the weight of old loyalties clouding her judgment. As Kesi walked down the dusty road leading away from everything she had once known, she thought about the question that had haunted her through 50 repetitions of that terrible day. What is the difference between duty and justice? Duty, she now understood, was about loyalty to people and institutions, even when they didn't deserve it. Justice was about loyalty to principles, even when following them was painful. For 7 years, she had served duty. For 50 loops, she had searched for justice. In the end, justice required her to abandon duty entirely. It was the choice she would have to live with for the rest of her life. But unlike those 50 cursed mornings, she would live with it in time that moved forward toward a future she couldn't predict or control. And that uncertainty, she realized, was the most beautiful thing of all. Years later, travelers throughout the known world will tell the story of the time loop assassin, the royal guard who was given infinite chances to save a king and chose instead to save a kingdom from its king. Some versions of the tale claimed she could still control time herself. Others insisted she had become an immortal champion of justice, appearing wherever tyrants held power. But the truth was simpler and more profound than any legend. Kesi had learned that the greatest power isn't the ability to change the past or control the future. It's the courage to make the right choice in the present moment, even when that choice cost you everything you thought you wanted. And in a world full of impossible decisions and imperfect solutions, that courage was the rarest magic of all. Some curses, she discovered, are just blessings in disguise. The question is, are you brave enough to break them?